Good evening, and welcome to Restored Lore, your home for old, odd, and obscure stories. Tonight's story is The Complicity of Enoch Embody by Margaret Collier Graham. This story comes from Graham's collection, Stories of the Foothills, published in 1895. It is really a lovely story, complex and thoroughly charming. Now, let's open our imaginations and begin. Part 1. The afternoon train wound through the waving barley fields of the Temecula Valley and shrieked its approach to the town of Muscatel. It was a mixed train, and half a dozen passengers alighted from the rear coach to stretch their legs while the freight was being unloaded. Enoch Embody stood on the platform with the mailbag in his hand and listened to their time-worn pleasantries concerning the population of the city and the probable cause of the failure of the electric cars to connect with the train. Enoch was an orthodox friend. There was a hint of orthodoxy all over his thin, shaven countenance, except at the corners of his mouth, where it melted into the laxest liberality. A swarthy young man with a deep scar across his cheek swung himself from the platform of the smoking car and came toward him. "Is there a stopping place in this burg?" he called out gaily. "Thee'll find a hotel up the street on their right," said Enoch. The stranger looked at him curiously. "By gum, you're a Quaker!" he broke out, slapping Enoch's thin, high shoulder. "I haven't heard a thee or a thou since I was a kid. It's good for earache. Wait till I get my grip." He darted into the little group of men and boys who were listening with the grim appreciation of the rural American to the badinage of the conductor and the station agent, and emerged with a satchel and a roll of blankets. "Now, Uncle, I'm ready. Shall we take the elevated up to the city?" he asked, smiling with gay good fellowship up into Enoch's mild, austere face. The old man threw the mailbag across his shoulder. "I'll take thee as far as the store. Thee can see most of the city from there." The young fellow laughed noisily and hooked his arm through his companion's gaunt elbow. Enoch glanced down at the grimy, broken-nailed, disreputable hand on his arm, and a faint flush showed itself under the silvery stubble on his cheeks. "By gum, this town's a daisy," said the stranger, sniffing the honey-laden breeze appreciatively and glancing out over the sea of wildflowers that waved and shimmered under the California sun. "Nice, quiet little place, eh?" "Thee hears all the noise there is," answered Enoch gravely. The young fellow gave a yell of delight and bent over, as if the shaft of Enoch's wit had struck him in some vital part. Then he disengaged his arm and writhed in an agony of mirth. "Holy Moses!" he gasped. "That's good. Hit him again, Uncle." Enoch stood still and looked at him, a mild, contemptuous sympathy twinkling in his blue eyes. "Is thee looking for a quiet place?" he asked. The newcomer reduced his hilarity to an intermittent chuckle and resumed his affectionate grasp on Enoch's arm. "That's about the size of it, Uncle. I've knocked around a good deal, and I'm suffering from religious prostration. I'm looking for a nice, quiet, healthy place to take a rest, to recuperate my morals, so to speak. Good climate, good water, good society, everything they don't have in some places. What's the city tax on first-class residence property close in?" "I think thee'll find it within thy means," said Enoch dryly. "Has thee a family?" "Well, you might say yes," rejoined the stranger. "That is, I'm married. My wife's not very well. I want to build a 7x9 residence on a fashionable street and send for her. I'm going to draw up the plans and specifications and bid on the contract myself, and I think by rustling the foreman I can get everything but the telephone and the hot water in before she gets here. Relic of the Tarara Boomdier? He asked, pointing to a vacant store building across the grass-grown street. Or bought up by the government, maybe, to keep out competition in the post office business. Hello, is this where you hang out? Enoch turned into the combined store and post office, and the stranger stood on the platform, bestowing his tobacco-stained smile generously upon the bystanders. You'll find the hotel a little further up the street, said Enoch. There may be no one about. I think I saw Isaac and Esther Penthorn driving toward Maravilla this afternoon, but they'll be back before dark. Thee can make thyself at home. You're right, I can, assented the newcomer with emphasis. I see you've caught on to my disposition. Isaac and Esther will find me as domestic as a lame cat. Be it ever so homely, there's no place like home. Bye-bye, Uncle. See you later. He went up the street, walking as jauntily as his burden would permit, and Enoch looked after with a lean, whimsical smile. Thee seems to have a good deal of cheek, he reflected as he emptied the mail-bag. But thee's certainly cheerful. Part 2. Within a week, every resident of Muscatel had heard the sound of Jerry Sullivan's voice. It arose above the ring of his hammer as he worked at the pine skeleton of his shanty, and the sage-laden breeze from the mountains seemed a strange enough vehicle for the questionable sentiments of his song. New and startling variations of street songs and other unfamiliar melodies came to Enoch's ears as he distributed the mail, or held the quart measure under the molasses barrel, and occasionally the singer himself dropped in to make a purchase and chat a few moments with the postmaster concerning the progress of his house. The architect is rather slopped over on the plans, he said when the frame was up. So I'm putting up a Queen Anne woodshed for the present, while he knocks a few bay windows out of the conservatory. A penny saved, a penny earned, you know. That's the way I came to be a millionaire. Stopped drinking in my infancy and learned to chew. Saved a rattleful of nickels before I could walk. Got any 18-karat nails, Uncle? I want to do a little finishing work in the bathroom. Enoch met his new friend's trifling, always with the same gentle gravity, but something, perhaps that lurking liberality about the corners of his mouth, seemed to inspire the young fellow with implicit confidence in the old man's sympathy. After the frame of Jerry's domicile was enclosed, a prodigious sawing and hammering went on inside the redwood walls, and the bursts of music were spasmodic, indicating a closer attention on the part of the workman to nicety of detail in his work. He called to Enoch as he was passing one day and drew him inside the door mysteriously. "Take a divan, Uncle," he said airily, pushing a three-legged stool toward his guest. "I've got something to show you, something that's been handed up to me from posterity. How does that strike you for a starter in the domestic business?" He drew forward an empty soap box, fashioned into an old-time cradle and fitted with rude rockers at the ends. "Happy thought, eh?" he rattled on, gleefully pointing to the stenciled end, where everything but "pride of the family" had been carefully erased. "How's this for a proud prospective paternal?" He balanced himself on one foot and rocked the little craft with all its cargo of pathetic emptiness gently to and fro. Enoch's face quivered as if he had been stabbed. The young fellow stepped back and surveyed his handiwork with jaunty satisfaction. "I made that thing just as a bird builds its nest, by paternal instinct. It's a little previous, and I'd just as soon you wouldn't mention it, but I had to show it to somebody. Got any children?" He turned upon Enoch suddenly. "No, not any living." The old man's voice wavered and caught itself on the last word. Jerry thrust the cradle aside hastily. "Neither have I, Uncle, neither have I," he said. "Not chick nor child. If you ain't too tired, let me show you over the house. I'm sorry the elevator isn't running so you could go up to the cupola. This room's a sort of e pluribus unum many in one, a kind of boudoir and kitchen combined. The other rooms ain't enclosed yet, but they're safe enough outside. That's the advantage of this climate. You don't have to put everything under cover. Ground plans suit you pretty well? I think these very cozy, Enoch said, smiling gravely. When does thee look for thy wife? Just as soon as she's able, said Jerry, drawing an empty nail keg confidentially toward Enoch and seating himself. You see, he stopped short. The cradle behind the old man was still rocking gently. I guess it won't be very long, he added indifferently. Part 3. The southbound train was late, and the few loafers who found their daily excitement in its arrival had drifted away as it grew dark, leaving no one but Enoch on the platform. When the train whistled, the station agent opened the office door, and his kerosene lamp sent a shaft of light out into the darkness. There was the usual noisy banter among the trainmen, and none of them seemed to notice the woman, who alighted from the platform of the passenger coach and came toward Enoch. She stood in the light of the doorway so that the old man could see her tawdry dress and the travel-dimmed red and white of her painted face. Is there a man named Jerry Sullivan living in this town? She asked. Enoch was conscious of a vague disappointment. Yes, he said, half reluctantly. He lives here. I suppose thee's his wife. The woman looked at him curiously. Then she laughed. Yes, I suppose I am, she said. Can you show me where he lives? I can't show thee very well in the dark, but it isn't far. If thee'll wait a minute, I'll take thy satchel and go with thee. He brought the mailbag and picked up the stranger's valise. Thy husband's been looking for thee, he said, as they went along the path that led across the vacant lot to the street. The woman did not reply at once. She seemed intent upon gathering her showy skirts out of the dust. When she spoke, her voice trembled on the verge of a laugh. That's so. I've been looking for him, too. Thought I'd give him a pleasant surprise. He's got his house about finished. The woman stopped in the path. His house? She sneered. He must be rattled if he thinks I'll live in a place like this, 40 miles from nowhere. They walked on in silence after that to the door of Jerry's shanty. There was a light inside, and the smell of cooking mingled with the resinous odor of the new lumber. Jerry was executing a difficult passage in a very light opera to the somewhat trying accompaniment of frying ham. The solo stopped abruptly when Enoch knocked. Come in, shouted the reckless voice of the singer. Let the good angels come in, come in. Enoch opened the door. Good evening, Jerry, he said gravely. Here is thy wife. The young fellow crossed the floor at a bound, with a smile that stayed on his face after every vestige of joy had died out of it. The woman gave him a coarse, triumphant stare. I heard you was looking for me, she said with a chuckle. But you seem kinda surprised after all. Jerry stood perfectly still with his hands at his sides. Behind him, where the light fell full upon it, Enoch could see the cradle. The old man placed the satchel on the step. I must go back and attend to the mail, he said, disappearing in the darkness. A few hours later, just as Enoch had fitted the key in the store door and turned down the kerosene lamp preparatory to blowing it out, Jerry appeared in the doorway. I gotta go away on the early train, he said in a dull, husky voice. She's going with me. I don't know how long I'll be gone, and I thought I'd like to leave the key of the house with you, if it won't be too much trouble." "It won't be any trouble, Jerry. I'll take care of it for thee," said Enoch. The hand that held out the key seemed to Enoch to be stretched toward him across a chasm. He felt a yearning disgust for the man on the other side. Jerry walked across the platform hesitatingly and then came back. "Would you mind locking up and coming outside, Mr. Embody?" he asked humbly. "I'd like to have a little talk with you." Enoch blew out the lamp and closed the door and locked it. He felt a physical shrinking from the moral squalor into which he was being dragged. "What is it, Jerry?" he asked kindly. "I've been thinking," said the young man hurriedly and in the same level, monotonous voice. "Families sometimes come to these new places without having any house ready, and of course it's a good deal of expense for them to board, and I just wanted to say to you that if any person, we'll say a widow with a family, I wouldn't care to help a man that could rustle for himself, but a woman, you know, if she's not very strong and she has a family, why, I'd just as soon you let her have the house, and you needn't say anything about the rent. I'll fix that when I come back. I haven't been to church and put anything in the collection since I've been here." His voice gave a suggestion of the old ring and then fell back drearily. "So I thought I'd hand you what I'd saved up, and you can use it for charitable purposes, groceries and little things like that people might need, coming in without anything to start." He handed Enoch a roll of money, and the old man put it into his pocket. "I'll remember what thee says, Jerry. If any worthy family comes along, I'll see that they do not want. If I can, I'll send you a little now and then," the young fellow went on more cheerfully. "But I'd just as soon you wouldn't mention it. I'll be back sometime, there's no doubt about that, but I can't say just when. You can tell the folks that my wife," he choked on the word, didn't feel satisfied here. She thinks it won't agree with her. And I guess it won't. She's very bad off." He turned away lingeringly and then came back. "About the crib," he faltered. If they happen to have a baby, I wouldn't mind them using it. Babies are pretty generally respectable, no matter what their folks are. I was calculating," he went on wistfully, "to get another box and hunt up some wheels, and I thought maybe they could rig it up with a pink parasol and use it to cart the baby round, you know. If a woman isn't very strong, it might save her a good deal. Then it's too late now." He turned away hopelessly. "I guess I can manage that for thee, Jerry," said Enoch. "I'm rather handy with tools. Thee needn't worry." The two men stood still a moment in the moonlight. "Goodbye, Mr. Embody," said Jerry. He did not put out his hand. Enoch hesitated a little. "Farewell," he said, and his voice was not quite natural. The next morning, when Enoch opened the outside letter box to postmark the mail that had been dropped into it after the store was closed the night before, he found one letter. It was addressed to Mrs. Josie Hart Sullivan, Pikeboro, Missouri. Part 4. "Are you the postmaster?" Enoch dropped the tin scoop into the sugar bin and turned around. The voice was timid, almost appealing, and Enoch glanced from the pale, girlish face that confronted him to the bundle in her arms. There was no mistaking the bundle. It was of that peculiar, bulky shapelessness which betokens a very small infant. "Yes, I'm the postmaster," answered Enoch kindly. "Is there anything I can do for thee?" The young creature looked down, and a faint color came into her transparent face. "I've just come in on the train," she faltered. "I thought you might be able to tell me where to go. I haven't very much money. I was sick on the way and spent more than I expected. I... She hesitated and glanced at Enoch with a little expectant gasp. "Is thee alone?" inquired the old man. "Yes, that is only baby. My husband has just... Her voice fluttered and died away helplessly. "Oh, thee's a widow," said Enoch gently. "Yes." The poor thing looked up with a smile of wistful gratitude. "I'm not very strong. I heard this was a healthy place. They thought it would be good for us, baby and me. I'm Mrs. Josie Hart. Baby's name is Gerald." "Would thee be afraid to stay in a house alone?" inquired Enoch thoughtfully. The stranger gave him a look of gentle surprise. "Why, no, of course not. Not with baby. He's so much company." There was a note of profound compassion for his masculine ignorance in her young voice. The old man's mouth quivered into a smile. He went to the back of the room and took a key from a nail. "I think I can find thee a real cozy little place," he said. "Shan't I carry the baby for thee?" She hesitated and looked up into his solemn, kindly face. Then she held the precious bundle toward him. "I guess I'll have to let you. I didn't really know it till I got here, but I began to feel, so awful tired," she said with a long, sighing breath as Enoch folded his gaunt arms about the baby. They went up the street together, and Enoch unlocked Jerry's house and showed the stranger in. She walked straight across the room to the cradle. When she turned around, her eyes were swimming. "Oh, I think it's just lovely here," she said. "I feel better already. This is such a nice little house, and so many wildflowers everywhere, and they smell so sweet. I know baby will like it." She relieved Enoch of his burden and laid it on the bed. The old man lingered a little. "Thee needn't worry about provisions or anything," he said hesitatingly. "Some of the neighbors will come in and help thee get started. Thee'll want to rest now. I guess I'll be going." "Oh, you mustn't go without seeing baby," insisted the young mother, beginning to unswathe the shapeless bundle on the bed. Enoch moved nearer and waited until the tiny, crumpled bud of a face appeared among the wrappings. "Isn't he sweet?" pleaded the girl rapturously. Enoch bent over and gazed into the quaint little sleeping countenance. "He's a very nice baby," he said with gentle emphasis. "And so good," the girl voice rippled on. "He never cried but once on the way here, and that time I didn't blame him one bit. I wanted to cry myself. We were so hot and tired and dusty. But he sleeps. Oh, the way he does sleep. There, did you notice him smile? I think he knows my voice. He often smiles that way when I'm talking to him." She caught him out of his loosened sheath and held him against her breast with a look on her face that has baffled the art of so many centuries. It was thus that Enoch remembered her as he went down the street to the store. "I would have taken her right home to Rachel," he said to himself. "But women folk sometimes ask a good many unnecessary questions, and the poor thing is tired." Part 5. So, the little widow and her baby became the wards of the town of Muscatel. After one or two unsuccessful attempts to learn the particulars of her husband's last illness, the good women of the place decided that her bereavement was too recent to be made a subject of conversation. The baby, on the contrary, being a topic all the more absorbing by reasons of its newness, they held long and enthusiastic conferences with the young mother concerning his care, clothing, and diet. With that gentle receptivity which makes some natures the defenseless targets of advice, the inefficient little mother felt herself at times between the upper and the nether millstones of condensed milk and coddles food, but her weak, appealing face always brightened into tremulous delight when the rival factions united, as they invariably did, on the subject of the baby's undoubted precocity in the matter of noticing. Enoch was called in many times to give counsel, which seemed to gain from his masculinity what it might be supposed to lack by reason of his ignorance concerning the ailments and accomplishments of the small stranger who held the heart of the community in his tiny purple fist. It was to Enoch that the young mother brought her small woes, and it was with Enoch that she left them. The song of the hay balers and the whir of the threshing machine had died out of the valley, and the raisin-making had come on. The trays were spread in the vineyards, and the warm white air was filled with the fruity smell of the grapes browning and sweetening beneath the October sun. One drowsy evening Enoch was in the back room of the store, weighing barley and marking the weight on the sacks. Suddenly there was a quick step and a voice in the outer room, and the old man turned slowly with the brush in his hand and confronted a man in the doorway. "Jerry." "Yes, Uncle, here I am, slightly disfigured, but still in the ring. How's the market? Long on barley, I see. He broke off suddenly and assumed an air of the deepest dejection. "I've had a great deal of trouble since I saw you, Uncle. I've lost my wife." He turned to the window and pretended to look through the cobwebbed glass. "She went off very sudden, but she was conscious to the last." Enoch stood still and slowly stirred the paint in the paint pot until his companion turned and caught the glance of his keen blue eye. "Does thee think she will stay lost, Jerry?" he asked quietly. The young fellow came close to Enoch's side. "You bet," he said with low, husky intensity. "The law settled that. She was a cursed fraud anyway," he went on with hurrying wrath. "She ran away with... I thought she was dead. I'll swear by..." "Thee needn't swear, Jerry," interrupted Enoch quietly. "If thy word is good for nothing, thy blasphemy will not help it any." The young man's face relaxed. There was a little silence. "Has thee been up to thy house?" asked Enoch presently. Yes, said Jerry lightly. "I dropped right in on the family circle. The widow seems to be a nice, tidy little person, and the kid... Did you ever see anything to beat that kid, Uncle?" Enoch had been appealed to on this subject before. "He's a very nice baby," he said gravely. "They seem to be settled rather comfortably, and I guess I'll get a tent and pitch it on some of these vacant lots and not disturb 'em. The little woman isn't really well enough to move, and besides, the kid might kick if he had to give up the cradle. Perfect fit, isn't it?" "Enoch," said Rachel Embody to her husband as they drove their flea-bitten gray mare to the Friends' meeting on first day, "what does thee think of Jerry Sullivan and the widow Hart marrying as they did? Doesn't thee think it was a little sudden for both of them?" Enoch slapped the lines on the gray's callous back. "I don't know, Rachel," he said. "There are some subjects which I do not find profitable for reflection. There's such a lovely delicacy and sensitivity to the way this story is written, embodied, of course, in the character of Enoch. In the interest of nominative determinism, I looked up the meaning of the name Enoch. It's a Hebrew name and it means trained, disciplined, wise, clever. I have to imagine that the character name was chosen deliberately, especially when contrasted with a Jerry Sullivan. Their friendship is so odd, and of course it seems imposed on poor Enoch. Jerry is a talkative, effusive, extroverted type, but also eventually reveals quite a lot of delicacy and sensitivity. It's a really lovely story, and it unfolds so gently. It feels like a slow story that takes its time, even though it actually isn't that long. Of course, the word "thee" feels positively medieval to us today, but it's actually not that old of a word. Some people claim that it needs to make a comeback. "Thee" is the rightful English second-person singular, as Enoch uses it in this story. "You" is rightfully the second-person plural, the word we limp along without unless we give in and use "y'all." I just listened to a great podcast where John McWhorter and Malcolm Gladwell discussed the relative merits of adding either "thee" or "y'all" to modern formal English. Margaret Collier Graham grew up in Iowa and she went to Monmouth College in Illinois. After graduating, she taught for a few years before marrying her college boyfriend, an attorney. When he contracted tuberculosis, they moved out west to Pasadena, California. And she settled into being a teacher and a short story writer, and she eventually built herself a career and quite a reputation as a literary figure. She and her husband built a mansion and they entertained local luminaries. Eventually, he became the first mayor of South Pasadena, and Margaret and her sister established the Lyceum, the precursor to the Pasadena Public Library. Margaret wrote and published frequently and with recognition. She was also a suffragette, and she worked to preserve California's historic missions. Today, she and her husband and their mansion all have their own Wikipedia pages, but none of them are very well known outside of Pasadena. I'm really enjoying her short stories, but some of them are sad, y'all. If you listen all the way to the end of the video, you get to hear me make a little confession. The first confession is I think I'm going to need to put an ambient audio track on here because my stomach has been making tiny noises this entire recording session. The second confession is that I am a strong candidate for a job that I really want. A person in that department sent me the listing a couple weeks ago asking me if I wanted to apply, and of course I did, and I did. And then today I got a message on LinkedIn from somebody who's pretty high up in the organization sending me the job listing again and asking me if I'm interested in applying, and so I told him that I already had. Of course, we can't ever count our chickens before they hatch, but it's a pretty good sign. And I am, perhaps, the best candidate for that specific job because I have such a unique and weird combination of skills. On the other hand, it has been many, many years since I worked for anyone, and I have some trepidations about what it might mean to have a boss and a badge again after so long. I might not be fit to return to civilization. I might have gotten too used to howling away out here in the wilderness. But it doesn't hurt to apply anyway, and I am very curious to see what happens. If you are a curious person, subscribe to the channel and choose notifications so you never miss a story. Please also give me a "thee" or a "y'all" in the comments below. Let's see if we can't correct a mistake in the language before too many more centuries go by. And, of course, if you feel like supporting me even further, consider buying me a coffee using the link in the description. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in a few days.